My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 7 years I believed my husband and I shared everything. The house, the bills, the dreams, the responsibilities. Or at least, that's what I thought. Looking back now, I realize there were signs. Tiny little moments that didn't seem important at the time. Like how David always insisted on handling our finances. Whenever I asked about our savings, he'd smile and say, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I've got everything under control." And because I trusted him, I never questioned it. That trust almost cost me everything. It all started on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was driving to work when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. Normally, I ignored unknown calls. But for some reason, I answered. "Hello, this is Sarah." A calm female voice replied. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell. This is Rebecca from First National Bank." I smiled politely. "How can I help you?" There was a brief pause. "I'm calling regarding your loan application." I frowned. "My what?" "Your $300,000 business loan." My heart skipped a beat. "I'm sorry. I think you've called the wrong person." She sounded confused. "You're Sarah Mitchell, correct?" "Yes." "And your social security number ends in 4821? "Yes." "Then this application belongs to you." I pulled my car into a parking lot. Something wasn't right. "I've never applied for any loan." Silence. Then she quietly said, "Mrs. Mitchell, your signature is on every document." I felt the blood drain from my face. "My signature?" "Yes." "Would you like me to email you copies?" "Please." 5 minutes later, the documents arrived. I opened the first page. There was my full name, my address, my date of birth, and a signature that looked almost exactly like mine. Almost. The more I stared at it, the more I realized something was off. The curves weren't natural. The letters were too perfect. Someone had copied my signature. Someone who had practiced it. Only one person had access to enough of my documents to do that. My husband. I left work immediately. When I arrived home, David was sitting on the couch watching television. He smiled. "You're home early." I placed the printed loan papers on the coffee table. His smile disappeared instantly. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked one simple question. "What is this?" He looked at the papers, then back at me. "I was going to tell you." "No. You were caught." He rubbed his forehead. "It isn't what it looks like." "Oh. It looks like someone forged my signature." He sighed. "I didn't forge it. I traced it." I stared at him. "You traced my signature?" "It was only because the bank needed both spouses to approve the loan." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You committed fraud." "I was trying to save my business." "What business?" He blinked. "You didn't know?" "No." David had secretly invested nearly $200,000 into a construction company with his college friend. The business failed within a year. Instead of telling me, he tried to borrow $300,000 to cover the losses, using my name, my credit, my future. Without asking me, I stood there in complete silence. For 7 years, I thought we were building a life together, and said he had been building debt behind my back. Then he said something that hurt even more. "I thought you'd understand." I laughed. "You thought I'd understand identity fraud?" "It's not fraud. We're married." I couldn't believe those words had actually come out of his mouth. Marriage didn't give him permission to sign my name. It didn't give him ownership over my financial future. And it certainly didn't give him the right to risk everything I'd worked for. That night I barely slept. I kept asking myself one question. If I hadn't answered that phone call, would I have ever known? The next morning I scheduled a meeting with the bank. What I learned there changed everything. The loan hadn't been approved yet, but it was only hours away from final authorization. If I had arrived 1 day later, I would have legally owed $300,000 for a business I didn't even know existed. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to protect myself. Because if my husband could lie about something this big, what else was he hiding? The next morning, I arrived at First National Bank 15 minutes early. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing those loan documents with my forged signature. The loan officer, Rebecca, greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for coming." She led me into a private meeting room. A thick file was already waiting on the table. Rebecca slowly opened it. "There are a few things you should see." I nodded. She handed me every page David had submitted. The loan application, income statements, business records, copies of our marriage certificate, and then, she placed one final document in front of me. It was a copy of my driver's license. Except, I had never given it to the bank. "Where did you get this?" I asked. Rebecca answered quietly. "It was included with the application." That meant David had secretly copied my personal documents months earlier. He hadn't made one bad decision. He had planned this. Rebecca looked at me carefully. "Mrs. Mitchell, based on what you've told us, we're suspending the application immediately." I finally exhaled. "But," she continued, "our fraud department will need an official statement." "I'll give you whatever you need. And," she hesitated, "you may also want to review your credit report." "Why?" "Sometimes forged loan applications aren't the first." Those words hit me like a truck. Not the first. That afternoon, I requested my full credit report. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed something strange. A home equity line of credit, $485,000, opened 8 months earlier. I had never seen it before. I immediately called the lender. After verifying my identity, the representative asked, "You're calling about your active account?" "My active what?" "The home equity credit line." "I never opened one." Silence. Then he quietly replied, "Mrs. Mitchell, the funds were withdrawn the same week the account was approved." My hand started shaking. David hadn't just tried to borrow $300,000. He had already borrowed $85,000 against our home. Without telling me. That evening I returned home. David was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked exhausted. "So," he said softly, "what did the bank say?" I placed another folder in front of him. "This." He opened it. The color drained from his face. "You checked my credit." "Our credit." He looked down. "I was going to pay it back." "With what?" He stayed silent. I asked another question. "Where did the $85,000 go?" He rubbed his forehead. "The business." "What business?" He whispered. "It never really existed." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He finally admitted the truth. His college friend had convinced him to invest in a luxury property project. The project turned out to be a scam. David lost almost everything. Instead of telling me, he borrowed more money, then more, then tried borrowing even more. Each lie required another lie to cover the last one. I stood up. "Why didn't you just tell me?" He looked at the floor. "Because I was embarrassed." "You should have been. But embarrassment isn't an excuse for fraud." Tears filled his eyes. "I know. I never wanted to hurt you." I replied quietly. "You didn't just hurt me. You broke the one thing a marriage can't survive without: trust." The following week, the bank's fraud investigation officially began. A handwriting expert compared my real signature with the one on the loan documents. The conclusion was clear. The signature had been copied, not written by me. The loan application was permanently canceled. The bank removed my name from every document. I owed nothing. But the investigation didn't end there. Because David admitted everything. He accepted responsibility for forging my signature and misleading the bank. To avoid a lengthy criminal trial, he reached a legal agreement that included probation, restitution, financial penalties, and mandatory fraud prevention counseling. His professional license was also suspended. Watching him sign those papers was heartbreaking. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I remembered the man I married. The honest man. The kind man. Somewhere along the way, fear had turned him into someone I no longer recognized. A month later, David asked if we could meet one last time. We sat across from each other in a quiet coffee shop. He looked older. Tired. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I looked into his eyes. For the first time in months, I believed he meant it. "I forgive you." His face lifted with hope. Then I gently added, "But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was." He slowly nodded. "I understand." A few weeks later, our divorce was finalized peacefully. There were no arguments, no courtroom drama, just 2 signatures, and the end of a chapter neither of us had imagined. I kept the house because I had always paid my share of the mortgage. David accepted the court's decision without objection. Before leaving the courthouse, he quietly said, "I hope one day you find someone who deserves your trust." I smiled sadly. "I hope one day you become someone worthy of someone else's." Then we walked in opposite directions. Today, whenever people ask me why I always read every document before signing it, I smile. Because I learned that trust is precious. But trust should never replace wisdom. Loving someone doesn't mean ignoring red flags. And protecting yourself doesn't mean you love someone less. The strongest relationships are built on honesty. And the moment honesty disappears, so does everything else. Looking back, I didn't lose everything that year. I lost a marriage, but I saved my future. And if that phone call from the bank had come just one day later, my life would have been completely different. The worst day of your life becomes the day that saves it.